Hello everyone and welcome to another video. In today's video I want to explore converting my HP Z200 computer from a workstation into a gaming computer. You can kind of see over here beside me that I have the system torn apart and painted. I actually updated the paint job to get rid of some of the defects in the case and added some gaming components to it, so I want to talk about that and show you some of its performance before I go ahead and sell it for somebody who needs an entry-level gaming PC. Here on my desk you can see the HP Z200, what it looks like before I did any work to it. Up near the top center of the case you can actually see a huge scratch, and on the front corner of the case you can see some scuffing, and there's actually some chunks of plastic missing from some of the front part of the case. So those are the things that I need to cover while I work on the HP computer. The clutter around the computer is a bunch of Chromebooks on my workbench. I fixed those for the school I work for, so you can kind of ignore all of that. Like many pre-built systems, there are things you may run into that limit the capabilities of the computer. For example, on this machine, the power supply does not use a standard pinout, so if you plug in a regular power supply, the computer won't work. You can buy an adapter or make an adapter to run a regular power supply on this computer, but then you also have to drill the case a little bit, and the person who owned this before me tried to do that and couldn't get it to work. So if you look right under the power supply, there's a little bit of metal where they cut the case to fit a standard size power supply. So in this case, I've decided to leave the power supply the same and only change to a graphics card that doesn't require any external PCIe power. I will be putting in a new Inland Professional solid-state drive. They're not the best drives, but they're adequate and they work really well. And I also am putting in a new 2 terabyte mechanical drive that will give game library storage. The top card in this computer is a USB 3 card. I'm going to take that out and put it in a different build. This computer only has USB 2 built in, but that card doesn't belong to me. On the bottom of this computer there is a FireWire card that I'm just going to take out. That doesn't need to be inside of the new build. And then finally, I've been using a GT 710. This is my tester graphics card. I use it because it gives me the connections that I need to test pretty much any PCI Express computer nowadays, just in case I run across a computer like this one that doesn't have a built-in CPU. I'm going to put in an RX 560 graphics card. I'm going to show you a few pictures of the painting process while I cover the specs of the computer, and then we'll get into the gaming performance. This HP Z200 only supports BIOS mode. It does not support UEFI. It's running an Intel Xeon X3470. That's a 2.93 gigahertz processor with 4 cores and 8 threads. It's running 16 gigabytes of RAM in dual channel mode. As I mentioned, I'm removing the GT 710 tester graphics card, and I'm going to put in an Radeon RX 560 4GB. I will be putting in a brand new 240 gigabyte solid state drive and a 2 terabyte game storage drive for the new owner of this system. In all of these games, I was running a resolution of 1920 by 1080, and where possible, I turned VSync off and started with the default settings for each game, however it set it for my computer. Starting here in Minecraft, you can see that we're over 60 frames per second. Most of the time, that's where this game was sitting on this computer. There were some lows in the 40s when I was loading new chunks or flying and loading chunks really fast since I am in creative mode. In this game, it didn't matter if I was windowed or full screen, the frames per second was about the same. Diablo III is one of my favorite games. I still play it a lot. I wanted to load into an area where there was going to be a lot of creatures and a lot of artifacts on screen so we could get an accurate representation of the FPS. And for the most part, we were getting 100 plus frames per second. In some areas of extreme action, a lot of spells, things like that, I did see some drops into the 70s, but the game played and ran really smooth, and it's a perfectly acceptable experience. In Doom Eternal, I went ahead and started a new game, and I started playing just with the default settings that it had picked for this computer. And after playing for a little while in the 40 frame per second range, I noticed that it picked the high settings for pretty much everything in the game as kind of a custom preset. So I don't think it carried anything over from a previous computer, because I don't think I've played Doom Eternal on this drive before, but lowering the settings in the game would increase that frame rate and give an even better experience. 40 frames per second was playable, but it may not be the best experience for everybody. In Fallout 76, I loaded my character and started wandering around the wasteland, and the default settings kept the frame rate around 30, which was okay, but I didn't really like it. So in this game, I actually played with the settings, and I went from using a borderless window to be full screen, and then I also changed everything to medium, and the frame rate changed from 30 to 40, so going to even lower settings would probably allow this game to run a bit more. And you can clearly see in this game that we are GPU bound. If the purchaser of this system some point wants to upgrade the video card, they could do that, and they could probably remove some of that bottlenecking that's being caused right here and get a better gaming experience. The next game I tested is Skyrim Special Edition. I like to go back and play this game all the time. I just think it's a fun game. And in this computer, you can see that at the beginning here, I'm running at 60 frames per second, but then I cut and jump a little bit where we started moving, and the frame rate dropped to 50. And this computer game runs around 50 frames per second consistently on this game. Once you're able to start moving and doing things, it doesn't quite hover around that 60 frames per second mark. On the original PlayStation, the Resident Evil series were some of my favorite games, so when they were remade, I purchased those. And running Resident Evil 2 here, you can see that it's hovering around 40 frames per second. But something to note about this game is that the graphics memory is having problems because it's set in a way that it's using over 4 gigs of memory. And so on this game, I couldn't really play it effectively until I reset the video game settings. Once I reset the video game settings to default, you can see the video memory went down to 2.3 gigs approximately, and then the game was running much better, but it still hovered around that 40 to 50 frame mark, so going to low settings would definitely help this game out as well. The last game I want to showcase here on this computer is Fortnite. You can see barely the frames per second is about 45 frames per second on average. It's kind of hard to see because it's right there with the names, but this computer does run Fortnite really well. If I wanted to play competitively, obviously I would go down to the low or professional settings here to give my computer the most frames per second possible so that I could take advantage of high frame rates and high refresh rate monitors to be the best competitive player I could. But Fortnite does run extremely well on this computer overall. With a fresh coat of paint and some new hardware, this HP Z200 is looking great, and it's ready to play some games. As an entry-level gaming PC, I think this computer will be doing great. You saw the benchmarks that I showed in games new and old. It has the ability to perform at a decent level, and it can bring somebody a lot of joy. The video card is the limiting factor in this machine right now, but it can be upgraded in the future. I think the best part about that, the NVIDIA 3000 series are coming out, and the AMD 6000 series are coming out in the next month or so. So that will hopefully drive some prices down. And once that component's upgraded, it can go from an entry-level machine to a very moderate machine. And it's ready to go for some time with that 4-core processor and 8 threads and 16 gigs of RAM. It should serve somebody really well for a while. I think using pre-builts are always a great way to build a cheap gaming PC. Just watch out for those gotchas that pre-builts come with that build your own PCs do not. Example, in my case, again, the power supply is proprietary, so I'm limited on my upgrades. I can buy an adapter or build an adapter and put in a regular power supply, but in this case, I didn't want to do that. I did rebuild this from parts that I had lying around because I no longer need this PC. I actually was using this as my workstation at work, and I replaced it with a Threadripper. I know somebody may ask, the video card in there is the GT710. It was my tester graphics card before the RX 560 here, and that's because when I had it at work, I used that USB 3 card and a Quadro card that belonged to my office, and I took those things out to build this gaming PC. And so with that, I'd like to leave things here, and I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Please like this video, or give it a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Always in the comments tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. I'll use that information to bring you content you want to see and make my videos better. And please subscribe to my channel if you like my content. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.